The forest was dead still, not a single leaf trembling, not even the whisper of pine needles brushing in the wind. But something was wrong. Cal Fisher could feel it crawl under his skin before he even saw the tree. He tightened his grip on the handle of the hand-forged axe resting over his shoulder. Blitz, the 12-year-old German shepherd who rarely left his side, stopped mid-step. His body stiffened, his ears locked forward. Then came the low growl, not warning, not anger, but something older, primal, ancient. Cal turned to look at him. Blitz wasn't growling at a bear, or cougar, or coyote. He was staring at a tree. Cal followed his gaze. There, 30 feet ahead, stood a lodgepole pine. Massive, easily over 70 years old. But what caught Cal's attention was the strange growth on its trunk, an enormous, unnatural lump, like the tree had grown around something that didn't belong. It bulged outward about 5 feet up. The bark stretched thin and cracked, oozing dark sap that glistened like tar in the fading afternoon light. Blitz let out a short, guttural bark, then backed away slowly. He hadn't done that, not once. In all the years they'd worked together through sand, desert, and blood. He had never shown fear, not even in the IED crater in Kandahar when everything went black. This was different. Cal's eyes narrowed. He'd seen plenty of tree burls during his years in the Cascades, especially up here on the northeast ridge where lightning strikes were common. But this one wasn't just a burl. It looked like the tree was hiding something, like it was swollen with purpose, like it wanted to be left alone. He stepped forward anyway. "Easy, boy," Cal said without turning. "I'm just going to take a look." Blitz didn't move. He stayed frozen on the trail behind him, body low, tail stiff, eyes never leaving the lump. Cal's boots crunched dry pine needles as he circled the tree. The closer he got, the more wrong it smelled. Not the sweet scent of sap or decaying bark, but something sour, like old meat and rot soaked into wood. He stopped a foot away, staring at a deep crack that had split open the bark. Something dark glinted inside. Not resin, not wood. Cloth? He stepped back instinctively, his stomach twisted, not with fear, but something sharper. Instinct. He reached into his pack for the headlamp and strapped it on. The sun was low, and the shadows under the tree were thick. He clicked the beam on and leaned closer. The light caught the edge of something slick and curved, wrapped in what looked like leather or fabric, embedded deep inside. Blitz barked again, louder this time, not at the tree but at Cal. A warning. That was new. He turned and locked eyes with the dog. Blitz's hackles were up, mouth open, teeth bared, but not at anything in the forest. At him. At what he was about to do. Cal looked back at the lump. His gut clenched, then loosened. He set the axe on the ground, reached for the folding knife on his belt, unlocked it, took a breath, and as he sliced into the bark with the blade, the tree released a wet, sucking sound, like air escaping a sealed room. The smell hit him like a wall, decay, sweat, oil, bone. His vision blurred, and for a moment he felt like he was back in Helmand Province, stepping into a burned-out compound where the air still stank of diesel, blood, and time. He coughed, backing away, hand over his nose. Blitz whined, pacing in place now, not running, but not approaching either. Cal swallowed the rising bile and stepped back to the tree. From the opening, something shifted. Not wood, not sap. Fabric. Old, thick canvas, the kind they used on jackets in the 80s. Stitched seams barely visible, half swallowed by tree flesh. He reached in with the knife and teased a corner loose. Underneath, a glint of metal. Dull but unmistakable. A belt buckle. No, not just that. A badge, still attached to leather. Cal's breath caught in his throat. He staggered back and dropped the knife. Blitz barked again, this time a sharp, urgent command. Cal turned slowly and froze. On the far ridge, across from the pine, stood a man, dressed in full camo, partially hidden behind the tree line. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, watching. Then he was gone, just like that. Cal blinked, trying to process what he'd seen, but he already knew. Someone had been watching him. Not a hiker, not a ranger, someone who knew that lump was there. Blitz padded slowly toward him now, ears still up, eyes still locked on the ridge. Cal crouched, grabbed the axe again, and looked at the wounded tree. His voice was a whisper. Someone put a body in there. Blitz didn't respond, but his body did. He moved closer to Cal, pressed his flank against his leg. And for the first time since the day they'd retired, Cal Fisher realized his war wasn't over. It had just followed him home. The night was colder than usual, the kind that sank into your bones no matter how many layers you wore. Cal Fisher strapped on his headlamp and tightened the leather strap around his wrist, making sure the axe handle wouldn't slip. He slid a pair of thick gloves over his hands, ones tough enough to handle timber and whatever else might be hiding inside that god-forsaken tree. Blitz stood at the edge of the clearing, body rigid. His eyes followed Cal, but he refused to take a single step closer. That was unheard of. This was the same dog who'd pulled wounded men out of collapsed buildings, who'd once stared down a Taliban fighter with a grenade in hand. Now he was afraid of a tree. Cal didn't like it either, but something deeper than fear pushed him forward. Maybe it was the soldier in him, the part that had spent years learning to trust instincts, to chase down the things that didn't add up. Or maybe it was the stillness, that unnatural quiet that hadn't lifted since the day before. He crouched beside the pine and ran a gloved hand along the distorted bark. It felt wrong under his fingers, too soft in some places, almost spongy and rigid like bone in others. He found the crack he'd opened the previous day. The dark sap had hardened slightly, but the smell was still there, thick and sour, like something had died inside and never been allowed to rot properly. He wedged the axe into the split, twisted and pulled. The bark peeled away with a wet, tearing sound. A heavy streak of black resin oozed out like it was bleeding. The smell got worse instantly, a noxious blend of diesel, old leather, and something disturbingly sweet. Blitz let out a sound Cal had only heard once before during a mission near Jalalabad, when a fellow soldier had stepped too close to a tripwire. A shrill, high-pitched whine that rose into a full-throated warning bark. Cal paused, panting. He turned and looked at Blitz. The dog wasn't looking at him. He was looking beyond him. Cal spun on instinct, axe raised. The woods behind him were empty. Nothing but pine and shadow. But that didn't mean nothing was there. "Easy, Blitz," he muttered. But the calm in his voice was a lie. He turned back to the tree and dug deeper. With each layer peeled away, more of the hidden object was revealed. First, more fabric-heavy canvas, faded olive green, like old military surplus gear. Then a strip of leather, cracked and dry. Not random, not forest trash. It had stitching. He traced it with his fingers and felt the outline of a pouch. He pried further. Another fold of bark came loose, and the beam of his headlamp landed on something that stopped his breath. A boot, still laced, still attached. He yanked off the glove and reached in bare-handed, pressing lightly. It gave beneath his touch. A leg, preserved in resin, but unmistakably human. He staggered back, dizzy. His hand trembled. The body had been here for years, maybe decades. Blitz's growl rose behind him again. It wasn't a fear growl this time, it was a challenge. Cal turned and froze. There was a footprint in the soft earth behind him. Fresh, large, deep, boot tread. Someone else had been here, maybe still was. He clicked off the headlamp instinctively, plunging them into near darkness. Only the moonlight filtered through the canopy. Silence. Then a crack of a branch. to the right. Cal moved fast, grabbing Blitz's collar. The dog didn't fight him but remained locked onto the direction of the sound. He whispered, "Stay low." They both did. A moment passed, then another. And then came the second sound. Faint, mechanical, clicking. A trail camera. Cal knew the sound too well. He used to deploy them himself. Someone was watching this tree. Not just by eye electronically, which meant whatever was inside that pine was never supposed to be found. And someone had gone to great lengths to keep it that way. He backed away slowly, eyes scanning the trees. Blitz stayed pressed against him, breath shallow, ears twitching. 10 feet behind the pine, almost buried under a carpet of moss and needles, Cal spotted it. The glint of plastic. He crawled forward and brushed the debris aside. There it was, a black trail camera, newer model, with night vision sensors and a built-in SIM card transmitter. The red light blinked once. It had just transmitted. Cal yanked it from the ground and killed the power with one quick twist of the battery cover. Then he buried it under a pile of rocks. He turned to Blitz. "They know we're here." Blitz didn't bark, but his eyes said enough. They were being hunted now. Cal looked back at the mutilated tree, at the pieces of a man entombed in bark and sap, left to become part of the forest. Whoever did this had come back to watch. And Blitz. Blitz had known before Cal had even touched the axe. This wasn't just about a body. It was about a message someone thought they buried 30 years ago. Now it was bleeding its way to the surface. And Cal Fisher wasn't the kind of man to walk away quietly. It took nearly an hour to cut through the rest of the bark, careful not to damage whatever was inside. Cal's hands worked on instinct, but his mind was a storm. A man buried inside a tree wasn't something that happened by accident. Not here, not in the middle of nowhere. Blitz sat 10 feet away, tense but silent, his eyes never leaving the forest. Every so often, his ears would flick, tracking sounds too faint for Cal to hear. Cal peeled back one last heavy slab of bark and found what looked like a canvas satchel. It had long since fused to the inside of the tree, stuck in the black sap like a fly in amber. He tugged slowly, careful not to rip it. It came free with a wet, suctioning sound that made his stomach turn. He opened the flap and pulled out the contents one by one. A brown leather wallet, swollen with age. A set of keys, still on a belt loop. A stainless steel ring, engraved with tiny block letters, HC. And at the bottom, a laminated work badge that had somehow remained mostly intact. The name on it was printed in bold, Brian Holloway Geological Survey Division, Washington State Energy Commission. Cal stared at the name, trying to place it. Then it clicked. Holloway had been on the news years ago. A cold case from the late 80s. He was a state geologist assigned to a controversial drilling survey in the Cascades. Vanished without a trace. Some said he ran off. Others whispered about sabotage, corporate cover-ups. But no one mentioned him being stuffed into a tree like a message. Blitz let out a sharp exhale through his nose, the kind Cal had learned to take seriously. A low huff, more thoughtful than scared. The dog stood now, legs firm, muscles tight. He stared toward the north end of the woods, not barking, not growling, just watching. "What do you see, Bud?" Cal murmured. Blitz didn't move. His gaze locked in like a sniper's scope. Cal returned to the wallet. He pried it open and flipped through the contents. Driver's license. A gas receipt from 1987. Photos too, to be exact. One of a woman holding a toddler, both smiling in front of an old Chevy Nova. The other was a blurry snapshot of a drill site, flagged and marked in red ink. At the very back of the wallet was a folded note. The paper was brittle, but legible. 4 words, scribbled in shaky handwriting. They found the core. Cal felt the chill return, seeping under his skin this time. The core. He didn't know what that meant exactly, but he had a sinking feeling it wasn't about rock samples. He placed everything gently into a Ziploc bag and tucked it inside his backpack. He'd report it. Eventually. But not before he figured out what Holloway had died for. Because this wasn't just a missing person case anymore. This was intentional. Someone had buried the man with his identity still intact. A message meant for someone who would know what it meant. Cal looked at Blitz again. The dog was trembling slightly now, though his stance hadn't budged. His fur was raised, hackles taut. Blitz had been with Cal through ambushes, firefights, roadside bombs. But this silence, this unease, it rattled even him. That night, sleep didn't come. Cal lay on the cot in the cabin, fully clothed, boots unlaced but still on his feet. The satchel sat on the table like it was breathing. Blitz lay by the door, eyes wide open, head up, ears constantly twitching. Every few minutes the dog would stand, circle once, then sit again, always facing the door. At 2:17 a.m., Cal heard it. Not a sound exactly, more like a shift in the weight of the forest. The wind stopped. The night froze. Then Blitz growled. Not the warning growl, not the I heard something growl. This one was low, guttural, rising from the center of his chest like it was coming from another place altogether. A primal, ancient sound meant to tell the world that something unnatural had crossed the line. Cal grabbed the rifle from under his bed and eased to his feet. "What is it, boy?" Blitz didn't turn. He just stared at the trees beyond the cabin, and then did something that unnerved Cal more than anything. He took 2 slow steps back. Retreat. That word didn't exist in Blitz's vocabulary, but whatever was out there, whatever was watching, had shaken even a battle-hardened war dog to the core. And Cal knew better than to ignore him. He killed the lights. No flashlight. No movement. He stood next to Blitz in the dark, his hand resting gently on the dog's shoulder. And they waited. Waited for the echoes in the sap to reveal what they had awakened. By morning, the wind had picked up, and so had Cal's urgency. He couldn't shake the image of Blitz retreating the night before, not in fear, but in calculated instinct. The forest had gone quiet around them, like it was listening, or waiting. Either way, it wasn't just about Holloway anymore. Cal knew the old Firewatch station abandoned since the early 2000s might still have archived field reports and missing persons cases if the rats hadn't chewed them all up. It was 4 miles up the ridge, nestled between the north slope and the forgotten trailhead that hadn't seen a boot print in years. He grabbed his pack, loaded Blitz into the truck, and headed out. The dirt road was half erased by time. Pine needles piled like forgotten memories, and downed branches made each turn feel like threading a needle. Blitz kept shifting in the passenger seat, his body alert, head low, eyes scanning the tree lines like a soldier re-entering enemy territory. "You still with me, partner?" Cal asked. Blitz didn't look at him, but his ear twitched just once as if to say, "Always." The Firewatch station was worse than Cal remembered. Roof partially caved, windows spiderwebbed, the old ranger signage barely legible under years of moss. But the door was still intact, though rust had turned the knob into a cruel joke. Cal kicked it open. Inside was stale wood, mildew, and the faint scent of old coffee grounds. Dust motes danced in the light, spilling through the slats. Blitz sniffed the floorboards, nose twitching like radar. Cal moved to the filing cabinets, long since tipped over and cracked open like scavenged bones. Reports, incident logs, maintenance notes, all water-stained but legible. He started digging. 3 hours later, in the back of a rotting metal drawer, he found it. Missing person report. Brian Holloway, date filed, August 14th, 1988. Filed by Dale Rourke, civilian last seen, near mile marker 47, East Ridge Trail. Purpose of visit, survey mapping, private meetup unknown to commission. He froze at the line, "Filed by Dale Rourke." Most reports were filed by spouses or employers. This one, a local. No listed occupation, no return contact number, just a scribbled note from the ranger on duty. Known to hike off-grid. Trusted source. Said Holloway had something big. Cal reached for his own topographic map and unfolded it on the cracked desk. Blitz came over, his breath warm against Cal's arm. Together they scanned it. Mile marker 47 wasn't far from where they'd found the tree. Then something else caught his eye, stuffed into a brown folder half-eaten by mold. A hand-drawn map. Red marker lines. Old, shaky handwriting. The letters HC circled 3 times, and one small note scrawled beside it. Dale R. Be there by dusk. Bring sample. Tell no one. HC. Cal whispered it aloud. Hidden cabin. Blitz let out a short huff. Not a bark, not a growl. More like a nudge. He placed one paw gently on the edge of the desk, eyes fixed on the map. You thinking what I'm thinking? Cal said. Blitz's tail gave a single controlled wag. Cal packed the map, Holloway's file, and the strange note into his bag. But before he zipped it shut, he paused. The name Dale Rourke stirred something loose in his memory. Not a name he'd heard recently, but it rang faintly like an old bell echoing in the back of a chapel long abandoned. Maybe someone from old logging circles? Locals didn't forget people like that. Back in the truck, he made a call. Hank? It's Cal. The voice on the other end was groggy, thick with years and tobacco. Well, hell. Ain't heard from you since your truck drowned in that sinkhole behind Benson's. Yeah, listen. You ever heard of a guy named Dale Rourke? Silence. Then, sure, old hermit type. Used to run gear for the state back in the day. Took early retirement. Bought land out by Devil's Backbone. Built himself a shack, they said. Vanished off the grid after 92, Cal exhaled. That land still his? Far as I know, but good luck getting there. No roads, just goat trails and bad luck. Cal smiled, despite the weight in his chest. That's all right. I've got 4 legs and one hell of a nose. He hung up, looked at Blitz. The dog was already turned toward the forest. Something deeper had been triggered now, an undercurrent of memory, a web of secrets long buried under soil and bark. Cal could feel it in the weight of the air, in the silence between Blitz's breaths. The forest wasn't just hiding Holloway's story, it was guarding it. And whatever was at that hidden cabin, it hadn't been meant to be found. Not by the government, not by the press, but perhaps by a man and his dog. The forest changed the deeper they went. What began as a crisp autumn morning turned heavy and damp, the kind of wet that seeped into your boots and clung to your breath. Cal moved with a practiced quiet, letting Blitz take the lead. The dog had gone into full working mode, head low, tail still, nose cutting through layers of moss and memory. They were well past the maintained trails now. The topography shifted subtly, like the land itself was guiding or resisting their passage. Twice, Blitz froze mid-step, ears flicking, body coiled. And twice, Cal paused behind him, hand grazing the butt of his knife out of habit. But each time, Blitz moved on without sound. The map had marked a bend in the ridge, just past a dry creek bed choked with birch roots and old beer cans. Cal squinted at the contour lines, then glanced up. The trees opened into a clearing so sudden and silent it felt like they'd stepped into a pocket of time. There, half swallowed by bramble and lichen, stood what remained of a cabin. Not a government structure. Not a ranger post. A hunter's shack, maybe, built from pine planks weathered to silver, the kind you didn't find on any official map. Blitz stopped, growled low, not hostile, wary. Cal approached, stepping lightly over scattered tin cans and cracked solar lights. The door wasn't locked, just swollen into its frame. He leaned in with his shoulder, and it gave way with a sound like breath being held too long. Inside, the scent hit him first. Not rot, not fresh either. It was lived in. Not long ago, a metal cot with a thermal blanket still slightly rumpled, a folding chair next to a dry sink. On the wooden shelf above, food tins, a portable solar panel battery, and next to it an old military radio with its antenna propped through a crack in the roof. "Someone's been here," Cal whispered. Blitz nosed toward the far corner, where a steel storage bin sat half-hidden under a faded tarp. Cal followed, his gut tightening. He flipped the lid. Inside, time broke open. A leather-bound field journal marked with geologic notations, the kind Holloway was known for. A pair of boot size 11, caked in hardened resin and old mud. And under a folded poncho, a stainless steel thermos engraved faintly with the initials B.H. Cal exhaled. "You were here, Holloway." Blitz let out a short, alert huff. He was facing the back wall now, rigid, tail low but straight. "Blitz?" The dog didn't move, just stared. There, embedded behind a false panel, was something odd small slits cut into the wall in deliberate symmetry, covered with mesh and fitted with foam. A soundproofed chamber, not for sleeping, not for storage, for listening. Cal crouched and pulled it open. Behind the panel, cables led to a backup battery and an audio recording device. The kind used by field agents, not hunters. It had 2 blinking lights, one green, one red. Still running. He pressed play. Static, then a click. Then a voice muffled, deliberate. "If you're hearing this, I was right not to trust Dale." Pause. They were looking for more than gold under these hills. The samples weren't just minerals. I found heat signatures buried deep. Like something alive. Another click. The message cut. Cal sat back on his heels. Alive? He looked over at Blitz. The dog had settled, but his eyes were locked onto the same panel. Cal followed his gaze downward and saw faint scratch marks along the floorboard, as if something had been dragged. Or struggled. He stood quickly, scanning the ceiling. A faint line of fresh wood grain crossed the top beam reinforced recently. The kind of modification done not for comfort, but for defense. This wasn't just a survival cabin, it was a bunker. Or worse, a trap. He stepped out for air. Blitz followed, but stopped at the door. Cal turned. A fresh set of boot prints led away from the clearing. Not his, not old, still moist in the mud. And Blitz was trembling and in fear, but coiled tension, every fiber of him pulled tight, like he was waiting for a command Cal hadn't yet spoken. Whoever was here last hadn't gone far. And maybe they hadn't gone willingly. Cal took a step into the forest, map still in hand, mind spinning. The next step in Holloway's trail wasn't on paper anymore. It was in the dirt, in the trees, in Blitz's nose and muscle memory. He knelt beside his partner. "Find him, boy." Blitz didn't bark. He didn't need to. The pines were whispering again. Not from the wind this time. Cal could feel it before he heard it, a subtle shift in the forest's rhythm. Birds went silent. The air grew too still, like the trees were holding their breath. Blitz stiffened beside him, ears standing high. The low, guttural growl that rolled from the dog's throat wasn't a warning. It was a verdict. Someone was out there. Cal didn't speak, just touched Blitz's flank gently and stepped back from the clearing, pressing himself against the shadowed corner of the cabin. Blitz moved with him, slow and silent as mist. Then crunch. A footstep. Not an animal. Too deliberate. Too heavy. Cal peeked around the edge of the cabin. 2 men. Both armed. One younger, wiry, in tan tactical gear that didn't quite match the terrain. The other older, bulkier, with a worn field jacket stretched across wide shoulders. He moved slower, but his eyes scanned like a man who'd been trained to hunt something that could think. The younger one spoke first. "You said no one comes out here." "They don't." The older man muttered, brushing aside a low branch. But something's changed. That dog's been sniffing around. Blitz tensed at the word. You sure it was the same tree? Same damn sap patterns. And now the recorder's been tripped. Either Holloway came back or someone found the stash. They were 20 feet away now, near the edge of the cabin. Cal pressed deeper into the wall, holding his breath. Blitz was still as stone, but his gaze was burning. The older man turned slightly, revealing a faded silver badge still clipped to his belt. Sheriff's insignia. Retired or rogue, it didn't matter. What mattered was the next thing out of his mouth. If someone saw the inside of that tree, they'll know. They'll know we lied. That he didn't just vanish. Cal felt a drop of sweat trace down his spine. The younger man spoke again. You think it was him? The older one shook his head. No, Holloway's not that lucky. But whoever it was, they're too close. The cabin door was cracked, and that dog-damned dog's too smart. Cal couldn't wait any longer. He tapped Blitz once. Move! But the second they turned to slip behind the cabin, Blitz erupted. A single explosive bark sharp as a rifle crack. It was a command, not a cry. The two men spun. There! The younger one yelled. Cal dove behind a fallen log as a shot rang out, splintering bark inches from his shoulder. Blitz darted low and fast, drawing their eyes and fire just long enough for Cal to vanish into the woods. Branches tore at his sleeves as he ran, but he didn't stop. Blitz reappeared beside him, panting, eyes alert, unharmed. They ran in practiced sync, one leading, one listening. Far behind them, voices echoed angry, confused, searching. Then silence. After what felt like miles, Cal dropped behind a dense patch of laurel and knelt. Blitz sat beside him, his flank heaving but his posture tight. Ready. You saved us again, boy. Cal whispered, brushing pine needles from the dog's coat. But Blitz didn't relax. His eyes were still scanning the trees. Cal followed the stare and froze. Tied to a branch just a few feet away was a strip of cloth military fabric. Camouflage, freshly torn, blood-stained. Someone else had run this trail recently, and they hadn't made it far. Cal looked at Blitz, then back to the trail. This wasn't just about Holloway anymore. The forest had more witnesses, and some of them were still alive. The moon barely cracked the dense pines, casting fractured silver over the forest floor. Cal crouched beneath a thicket of rhododendron, fingers pressed to the soil. Blitz lay low beside him, tail still, breath controlled, eyes locked on the ridge above. They were less than a quarter mile from the cabin. Cal had waited until past 2 a.m. The men, whoever they really were, hadn't returned since yesterday's brush in the woods. But Cal knew they would. Men with secrets like theirs never left loose ends untied, especially when one of those loose ends was breathing. He gave Blitz a signal. Wait. Then he moved, barely rustling a leaf as he passed between trees and shadows. The skills from another life-deep insertion reconnaissance, hostage extraction, high-risk infiltrations, they were still there, filed into muscle memory. War didn't leave a man. It just waited for invitation. The cabin looked different at night. Less like a ghost structure, more like a trap. But Blitz hadn't barked. That alone kept Cal moving. He approached from the rear this time, through the root tangle that led to the crawl space. A narrow vent still hung loose just as he remembered. He eased through, shoulders scraping bark, boots soundless on damp earth. Inside, the air was rank with mildew, but there was something else underneath it now, a faint metallic scent. Blood. Old or new, he couldn't tell. Blitz met him at the cabin's side door, having circled wide after ensuring the perimeter was clean. Cal opened just enough to let the dog in. Blitz didn't pace. He sniffed once, then went still near the far wall beside the rusted wood stove. Cal followed his gaze. A floorboard had been shifted slightly. Not recent, but not years old either. He pried it up with the tip of his boot knife. Inside the hollow were 3 items: a battered film canister, a leather-bound notebook, and a folded Sheriff's Department memo, yellowed and water-damaged, but legible. The notebook came first. Inside, pages thick with moisture curled at the edges, were names and numbers. Not just numbers amounts, dated, initialed. Many beside the same mark, DR. Cal paused. Dale R., the man Brian Holloway had scheduled to meet before disappearing. Each entry had a consistent pattern. Dollar amounts, weight, coordinates. This wasn't some backwoods hunting ledger. It was a smuggling log. Blitz shifted beside him, ears angling toward the door. Cal moved faster now. The sheriff's memo was older, dated 1990. It referenced a suspension. An officer named Brian Holloway had submitted a formal complaint against then-Deputy Dale R. involving unauthorized transport of geological equipment and possible tampering with federal survey records. The memo was unsigned at the bottom. The box checked case closed. A man tried to do the right thing, and then he vanished. Cal opened the last item, the film canister, still sealed, though the edges were brittle. He held it to the flashlight briefly, careful not to expose it fully. The label was smeared, but he could make out the number, 1989-7A. It was likely Holloway's. Maybe the last thing he ever tried to show someone. Outside, Blitz growled, low, short, then silence. Cal killed the light. He waited, listening. A twig cracked outside. Not animal. Too calculated. Then a voice, barely audible. "You sure it wasn't here he buried it?" The older man from before. "Maybe the kid took it. Maybe he's already gone to the press," came the younger one's reply. "We'd know. Someone would have called. He's still close. I can smell it." The older man laughed, but it was hollow. "You always say that." Then suddenly Blitz barked once, sharp and deliberate. A diversion. Cal was already sliding back into the crawl space with the evidence. They'd lost the element of surprise, but he'd found something they never expected him to uncover. This wasn't just a missing persons case. It was a 30-year-old cover-up wrapped in an old sheriff's badge, stained with blood and oil money. As Cal and Blitz disappeared into the night, slipping through trees like smoke, the film and notebook zipped tight in his chest rig. Cal made a silent vow. He was going to finish what Brian Holloway started. And Blitz silent, steadfast Blitz was already 2 steps ahead. The pine forest closed in like a trap. Cal had barely made it 300 yards from the cabin when the first shot cracked through the silence. It didn't hit him. It wasn't meant to. It was a herder's shot, designed to redirect. Panic a little, force a choice. Blitz didn't flinch. He pressed close to Cal's thigh as they dropped behind a downed tree. Cal scanned the tree line. His instincts whispered one word louder than anything else. Ambush. He'd seen too many like it in Afghanistan, in alleys outside Mosul, and once in an op in Honduras that still showed up in his nightmares. Same setup, same deliberate sloppiness. And then came the voice. Gravelled, familiar. "I know you're out here, kid. You should have left that cabin alone, Carl Renner." The voice was older than the man Cal remembered from his youth, but not by much. Age hadn't softened him. It had carved deeper grooves into a bitterness already rooted. Brian trusted the wrong people. Renner called out again, closer now. "But I'm not about to let another Holloway open old wounds." Cal didn't answer. He waited. Blitz's ears shifted, honing in on a soft footstep to their right. Another man. The younger one. Cal moved, just as the second gunman raised his weapon from behind a patch of scrub oak. Blitz lunged. No warning bark, no hesitation, just an explosion of motion. Teeth hit flesh. The man screamed, his rifle clattering to the ground as Blitz took him down with precision that was more than instinct, it was training. Hard-earned. Recent. This dog wasn't just loyal, he was lethal. Cal didn't have time to celebrate. Renner stepped into view, 30 feet ahead, his pistol already raised. "You think I won't shoot?" He spat. Cal's hand hovered over his holster. "You already did once. My father never made it home. That stopped Renner." A beat of silence. "You think you know what this is about?" Renner sneered. "You think it's about your damn daddy? You don't know a thing about what was going on in these hills." Cal stood slowly, unarmed. A gamble. "I know enough," he said quietly. "I know what's in that notebook. The payoffs, the shipments, the names, and yours is all over it." Renner's gun didn't waver, but his jaw tensed. "I don't need to bring you in," he said. "I can bury you in the same place your father should have been." Cal reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a small device. Black, blinking. Recorder. "I figured you'd say something like that." Renner fired. Cal twisted. Pain ripped through his shoulder as the bullet grazed him, spinning him to the ground. He tasted dirt, blood. Blitz growled low and primal. Cal managed to raise his voice, shaky but clear. "It's all on tape, Renner. Even if you kill me, it's going to someone. The FBI, the news, hell, I'll send it to every newspaper from here to Chicago." Renner hesitated, and then he laughed, a bitter, cracked sound that had too much history behind it. "You think the truth matters?" he said. Cal sat up slowly, wincing, pressing a hand to the wound. "No, but a confession caught on camera with your voice? That still carries weight behind him." Blitz stood guard over the second man, who lay whimpering on the forest floor, his arm bloodied, his mouth too scared to move. "Drop the weapon," Cal said, quieter now. Renner stared at him for a long time, then at the dog. And maybe, just maybe, he remembered the badge he used to wear, meaning something else once. He lowered the pistol, dropped it, and stepped back. Cal reached for the recorder and turned it off. "I didn't do this for vengeance," he said. "I did it because there are still families looking for answers." Like mine, Renner looked away, and for the first time that night, Cal saw something flicker in the old man's eyes. Not guilt, not quite. Maybe shame, maybe memory, or maybe just the realization that a dog and a wounded man had just brought down a 30-year-old lie. Blitz returned to Cal's side, sitting quietly. No bark, no gloat, just presence. Cal placed a hand on Blitz's head. The dog leaned in. "You didn't just bite back," Cal whispered. "You ended it." And this time, when the wind shifted through the trees, it didn't sound like danger. It sounded like closure. The first raid happened before sunrise. Cal stood just outside the ranger station's small parking lot, his arm in a sling, watching black SUVs snake up the ridge road. FBI agents in tactical gear moved with purpose. The air smelled of pine, diesel, and justice long overdue. Next to him, Blitz sat still, ears forward, posture alert but calm. He hadn't barked once since they left the woods. He didn't need to. The truth was loud enough. By noon, 4 arrests had been made. By nightfall, the number climbed to 13. Deputy Carl Renner was charged with obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and accessory to murder. The younger man, Ray Sullivan, was cuffed for aiding in the disposal of evidence. But that was just the surface. The real rot went deeper. Sheriff Lennox, the man who'd once pinned a commendation on Brian Holloway's chest, was led out of his own office in handcuffs. Cal didn't flinch. He didn't smile either. Some victories weren't meant to be celebrated. They were meant to be witnessed. Special Agent Lauren Greaves, the lead on the case, met Cal outside the interrogation room that afternoon. She flipped through a folder with a half-respectful, half-exhausted expression. "That notebook of yours cracked it wide open," she said. "Names, payments, mining coordinates. But the roll of film? That's what nailed it." Cal nodded. "I figured it was worth something." She pulled out a printed still from the developed negatives. It was grainy but clear enough. An aerial shot of deforested land deep within the restricted zone. Earth ripped open, machinery half buried. No permits, no oversight. "There's lithium under those hills," she said. "Millions in potential contracts. Illegal mining operations like this don't stay small for long." Cal stared at the photo. Brian knew. He tried to report it. The chain of command buried it. Renner made sure it stayed buried. Cal exhaled slowly. Until Blitz found that tree. Greaves glanced down at the dog lying by Cal's feet. "You're lucky he did." "No," Cal said. "I think we were just overdue for someone to listen." Blitz raised his head at that moment, sensing the weight in his handler's voice. His amber eyes locked with Cal's, and for a second there was no war, no pain, no forest, just understanding. The commendation ceremony was held 3 days later in a local school gymnasium, hastily converted into a makeshift hall. Rows of chairs, folded flags, a podium too small for the weight it carried. Cal stood off to the side in a dark suit, clean-shaven for the first time in months. His arm still ached, but it was healing. Blitz sat beside him, freshly bathed, his coat brushed until it gleamed. There was no leash. There didn't need to be. When the speaker called Blitz's name, the crowd erupted in applause. Loud, sustained, real. Cal didn't step forward. Blitz did. He walked, unprompted, to the center of the stage where a young woman from the Department of the Interior knelt down and placed a medal around his neck. The words etched on the plaque beneath read, "For extraordinary service, bravery under threat, and the preservation of life and truth." He didn't bark. He just looked out over the crowd with the same quiet vigilance that had saved a man's life and exposed a network of corruption older than some of the trees outside. Later that evening, Cal returned to the woods. Not the cabin, not the scene, just the trees. The pine where Blitz had first growled stood untouched, marked now with orange ribbon. Investigators had logged it as a critical landmark. Cal walked up to it slowly, running a hand over its bark, rough and scarred but living. When trees remember, they don't scream. They wait. They lean into the silence, into the soil, into the roots of men who have forgotten what it means to be upright. Cal knelt, placing his hand against the dirt, letting his fingers spread. "Thank you," he said. He didn't know if he was speaking to the forest, to his father's memory, or to the dog beside him. Blitz responded by pressing his nose gently to Cal's shoulder. Sometimes that was enough. The trail had grown wild again. Autumn leaves whispered under Cal's boots as he returned to the grove where everything had begun, where truth had clawed its way back into daylight, and where silence had once hidden a crime. He stood under the pine tree that Blitz had marked that first night. No one would know, just by looking, that this had once been Brian Holloway's secret grave. The government had reclassified the site as federal land and planted a perimeter of fresh saplings, a quiet memorial to the men who served without backup and the dogs who stood their ground. But Cal wasn't here for paperwork. He was here for closure. He knelt down with a small wooden plaque in his hands. Hand-carved, unfinished, the edges still rough like a soldier's memory. On the front, etched with nothing more than a pocket knife and patience, were the words, "Brian Holloway, U.S. Park Ranger, served quietly. Died honestly. No dates, no ranks, just the truth." Blitz watched from a few feet away, lying in the dirt with his paws tucked neatly under his chest, his breathing slow and even. His harness was off. No medals, no leash, just the dog and the wind, and the man who owed him everything. Cal pressed the plaque into the earth, fixing it with stones he had gathered himself, one for each step Brian must have crawled in the dark, trying to survive, trying to hold on to a duty no one else would carry. He stood slowly, shoulders stiff from the injury, from the months of grief stitched into muscle. But there was no heaviness in his breath, just something quieter, something like peace. Later that evening, back in his cabin, Cal opened his old deployment journal. Most of it was scorched around the edges from Kandahar, pages half torn, but the last one was clean, new, waiting. He picked up his pen and wrote, "He didn't bark for glory. He barked for the truth." Then he closed the journal and let the silence settle. Blitz shifted from his place near the door and padded over to the worn rug by the hearth, curling into the warmth like it was just another night. Like the world hadn't changed because of him. Cal watched him for a while, trying to find words big enough to carry the gratitude. There weren't any. Just this moment, this air, and this old dog who had once stood between him and death. Outside, the last of the sunlight filtered through the trees. The kind of light that makes you think maybe, just maybe, someone's still watching from up there. Someone who believed in honor, even when no one else did. Blitz didn't need applause. He didn't need anyone to know what he had done. But Cal would remember. Every day. And maybe you will too. So now, I'll leave you with a question. One that doesn't need an answer right away, but one worth holding on to as you look at the loyal eyes of the one who waits at your door. What's your story with a loyal pet? If this story moved you, if Blitz reminded you of a dog that changed your life, or a friend who never needed words to understand you share it, tell someone. And if you believe stories like his deserve to be remembered, support the German Shepherd channel, subscribe, share, keep their stories alive.